And finally, we have arrived at part 3 of my deadliest creatures in the 2024 Monster Manual series, where we're going to be covering everything from CR 19 all the way through CR 30. Now, there aren't a ton of creatures at each of these CRs, and if you don't even have anything in them at all, but the ones that are here are pretty insane and will unquestionably pose a significant threat to any party, no matter how well optimized. Now, this might sound like an obvious thing to say, but the reality is that there was a lot of very lackluster creatures in this range in 2014. So having some of these super strong and powerful creatures at the high end also helps to improve the viability of high-level play, which I'm always a fan of. So without too much else, let's just get into the final part of the series. Really quick, before I do just want to give another shout out to all of my channel members. Your support is incredibly helpful to help keeping me going, so truly, thank you all so much. And also, as fun as it was putting this series together, it really did take an incredible amount of time and effort. So if you'd like to help support the channel by liking the video, commenting about your favorite monsters, sharing it, or subscribing, it would really mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. This series has been so much fun. Alright, starting off with CR 19, it was really not challenging to figure out which creature is the deadliest since there was exactly one monster here, the Baylor. Leading off with an AC of 19 and 287 hit points, an 80-foot fly speed plus 14 to initiative, resistance to cold and lightning damage, and full-on immunity to fire and poison, the Baylor is already looking like a brick wall. Oh, and it boasts a ridiculously impressive plus 12 Constitution saving throw bonus and a plus 9 Wisdom saving throw. It's looking really hard to do anything to this thing, but it really only gets worse from here, or I guess better if you are the Baylor? Its Death Throws trait subjects creatures in a 30-foot emanation to a DC 20 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 9d6 fire and 9d6 force damage, totaling an average of 62 damage on a failed save. That is not much less damage than this thing can actually output just on a normal turn, and more than some creatures can actually deal around this CR. What makes it particularly devastating though, is that there's a good chance that the characters or players may not even be aware that this is even a thing, and 30 feet is a pretty sizable range and can fairly easily catch even some ranged characters or spellcasters in the blast. It's just crazy. And we still aren't even done yet. It has a fire aura that makes creatures within a 5-foot emanation at the end of each of its turns take an additional 3d8 fire damage. It's not a ton, but given that it activates at the end of the Baylor's turn, it's very easy for it to have control over who is affected by it, and makes it significantly more potent as a result. And oh yeah, it also just has 3 legendary resistances and magic resistance. Oh, and would you look at that? I haven't even got to its actions yet. Its multi-attack only grants 2 attacks, which doesn't sound all that rough, until you're realizing that they're hitting at a monstrous plus 14 to hit. The Flame Whip has a 30-foot range and deals an average of 35 combined force and fire damage, and it pulls the target up to 25 feet closer to it and knocks it prone, all without any additional save. It then follows it up with its Lightning Blade, which deals a combined average 43 lightning and force damage, and makes it so that the target can't take reactions until the start of the Baylor's next turn. It's worth remembering that the Flame Whip also just knocked the target prone, so that means that the Lightning Blade is attacking at advantage. This is just insane, and the Baylor can easily kill a party member without even breaking a sweat. Moving on to CR 20, the deadliest creature here has got to be the Pit Fiend. An AC of 21, 337 hit points, plus 14 initiative score, resistance to cold damage, and immunity to fire and poison, and both legendary and magic resistance. But again, it's not just the incredible defensive stats that make the Pit Fiend such a challenge to deal with. It's got a fear aura that has the potential to impart the Frightened condition to creatures within a 20-foot emanation, and that's tied to a massive DC 21 Wisdom save, which is going to make attacking the Pit Fiend a bit of a problem. But on top of that, its multi-attack allows for 4 attacks: 1 bite, 2 devilish claws, and a fiery mace. The bite attack imparts the poison condition and is again tied to a thick DC 21 Constitution saving throw. But the devilish claws and fiery mace just deal incredible damage. If we factor in the potential additional poison damage, it's dealing well over 100 damage per round, in addition to generating some brutal status effects. But hey, maybe that's still not enough. If you don't think it is, well, there's good news. It also has a feature called Hellfire Spellcasting. This allows it, on a 50% recharge, mind you, to cast Fireball at 5th level twice. And not like 2 times per day. No. Twice in the same action. Alternatively, it can replace one of those 2 fireballs with a cast of Hold Monster at level 7 or Wall of Fire. This is incredible, and some of the most ruthless spellcasting that we've seen so far. I think it goes without saying that the Pit Fiend is a true devil. Runner-up for CR20 is going to the Ancient Brass Dragon. Honestly, there isn't a whole lot to say here that hasn't been said already. I'm pretty sure that every version of the Brass Dragon has appeared throughout these lists at some point, and the Ancient Brass Dragon is just no exception. Its Sleep Breath is crazy, its Scorching Sands legendary action can also help to keep it incredibly safe and out of reach by many creatures. Probably the only sort of negative thing to call out here is the Fire Breath attack. We've already seen long line breath weapons be extended to 10 feet wide at lower challenge ratings, and we continue to see it happen with higher CRs as well, so it's a little bit strange that this one stayed at 5 feet rather than jumping up to the 10. I assume it's likely just because of how powerful the Sleep Breath is that they wanted to keep it at least somewhat toned down, but that's really just speculation on my part. Next up at CR21, the deadliest creature is the Lich. This is a big jump up from 2014, where the Lich was always one of the coolest creatures flavor-wise, but the thing may as well have had like 11 hit points for all the good that they did it. You really had to know what you were doing to run a Lich effectively in 2014, and design the encounter around that, because otherwise it would be so incredibly easy for the fight, what is likely to be a campaign-ending BBEG, to just completely fall flat. Fortunately, the new Lich is just kind of insane. With an AC of 20, 315 hit points, a plus 17 to initiative, resistance to cold and lightning damage, and immunity to necrotic and poison, as well as a bunch of other conditions, its defensive capabilities are already approximately a billion times better than they were in 2014. Offensively, this thing is no slouch either though. It can make 3 attacks using its Eldritch Burst or Paralyzing Touch in any combination. So if it happens to be in melee range with a creature for whatever reason, those paralyzing touches are going to be absolutely ruthless, considering once the creature is paralyzed, any subsequent hit will be an automatic critical hit. But it can also just straight up deal an average damage in excess of 90 per round without even needing to get fancy here. And if that wasn't enough though, it's also got access to both Fireball and Lightning Bolts upcast to level 5 at will. And it can also cast immunity and Dispel Magic and Dimension Door and Chain Lightning and Power Word Kill and Finger of Death, just to name a few other highlights. But the thing is, that's obviously still not enough. So why not add a use of Counterspell or Shield as a reaction an unlimited amount of times per day? That seems reasonable. Then there's its legendary actions, but specifically Disrupt Life, which thankfully it only gets to use once per round. That thing targets anything in a 20-foot emanation of the Lich and causes them to take 9d6 necrotic damage on a failed DC 20 Constitution save. I'm not sure how else to say it, other than that the new Lich is just ridiculous. Runner-up for CR21 is going to the Solar, and make no mistake, it's a runner-up, but that does not mean that the Solar is not completely crazy. I think its casual plus 20 initiative modifier firmly establishes that this guy is always going first. The Solar can legitimately roll a 40 for its initiative, which is honestly kind of hilarious. Anyway, it's got all the usual good stuff, but it does have a kind of fun trait that we don't see anywhere else. Divine Awareness makes it so that the Solar just always knows if it hears a lie. Just a nice fun flavor piece. Anyway, its multi-attack is wild. It can make 2 flying sword attacks or replace one of those with the use of Slaying Bow. Just 1 flying sword attack hits like a freaking truck with a plus 15 to hit at a 120-foot range and deals a combined average 58 damage split between Force and Radiant. That's already wild, but then we throw in the Slaying Bow, which subjects any target within 600 feet, yeah, that's right, 600 feet, to a DC 21 dexterity saving throw. If the target has 100 hit points or fewer, it just straight up dies. Not unconscious, no death saves, you're dead. But if you had more than 100 hit points, it still hits you for 36 radiant damage. it's really not going to take all that long before the solar gets you low enough to outright kill you with a slaying bow. Also, just a quick call out, its Blinding Gaze legendary action is tied to an insane DC 25 con save. Okay. Anyway, failing that, you're gonna have a hard time attacking, and those flying sword attacks are gonna be coming in hot when they're made at advantage. Moving on to CR22, the deadliest creature here is the Elemental Cataclysm. Side note, this looks like such a fun BBEG to include in a campaign. It's more than a monster, it's like an event in and of itself. I love it. You'd think that with an AC of 20 and 370 hit points that would be pretty solid. Nah. It's got a plus 18 to initiative, a 60-foot walking and burrow speed, and an 80-foot swim and fly speed with hover. On top of that, it has full-on immunity to, not just resistance, but immunity to acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, and thunder damage, and immunity as well to every condition with the exception of incapacitated. So I mean, have fun with that. Its multi-attack is nothing special, though it's cool that it can choose the damage type. The real power here, and the coolness, comes from its Cataclysmic Event feature, which is on a recharge 50% of the time. You roll a d4 to determine which event takes place, but they're all pretty incredible. Ranging from flames beginning to rage and causing everything to become burning, to what basically amounts to a sinkhole appearing and swallowing up everything. All of these abilities deal damage in addition to imparting some kind of status condition as well on a character. There's just so much that you can do with this type of a creature from a world building perspective, and I'm super hyped to have it here. Runner-up for CR22 is the Ancient Bronze Dragon. Now, we've done a couple dragons before and have a couple more as well, so I won't dwell on this one for too long. Suffice it to say that it's incredibly powerful, if for no other reason than its massive 22 AC and 444 hit points. What really makes these new ancient dragons powerful though, is their ability to combine their breath weapons with their rend attacks, letting them almost guarantee to reap the benefits of whatever status condition ends up being imposed. For the ancient bronze dragon here, it's able to knock creatures prone on a staggering DC 23 strength save, and then potentially just go to town with some rend attacks that are now being made at advantage. Also, here we do have the lightning breath weapon, which is made in a 10-foot wide line again, which is nice and cool to see. Next up, the deadliest creature for CR23 is an interesting one, because I think that there is a very strong argument to be made that it is actually the deadliest creature in the entire game, despite the fact that it isn't really close to being the top challenge rating. So I mean, if that still doesn't make you question the CR system, I'm not sure what to say. So, the deadliest CR23 creature, and potentially the deadliest in the entire game, is the Ancient Silver Dragon. Now, I know we've talked about plenty of dragons already, but this guy's just insane. Forget about its 22 AC and 468 hit points, its plus 14 initiative, whatever. What's really putting the hurt on here is its paralyzing breath, which subjects creatures in a freaking 90-foot cone to a ridiculous DC 24 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the targets become incapacitated until the end of their next turn, at which point they get to repeat the save. And if they fail again, well, they're paralyzed now. So what that means is that any of those rend attacks are now coming in hot at 4d8 plus 10 slashing and 4d8 cold damage assuming they hit, since now every successful hit while the target is paralyzed is an automatic critical hit. So, you know, just a casual 12d8 plus 10 and 12d8 cold damage per round on creatures that are likely fully locked in place here with no real way out. Escaping a save that high is going to be insanely challenging for just about any character. What's really wild about this is, again, like I mentioned with the Bronze Dragon, is that it can simply swap out just one use of its rend attack for a use of Paralyzing Breath, allowing it to even pull off this crazy combo in a single turn with zero downtime. But even still, just in case it doesn't paralyze everyone, it can just use one of its legendary actions to cast Hold Monster. Oh, and did I forget that it also has a 90-foot cone cold breath attack that deals an average of 67 damage? I don't know how else to slice it. The Ancient Silver Dragon is just insanely powerful. It can so easily lock down an entire group and then just devastate everyone with breath or rend attacks. It's just ruthless. Fortunately, most groups don't end up fighting with metallic dragons, so I'd highly caution against fighting one of these. Now, it is hard to follow that up, but our runner-up for CR23 certainly tries, and it is no slouch either. Our runner-up for CR23 is the Empyrean. Not only does it have incredible defensive stats and a monstrous plus 19 initiative score, it's one of the few remaining creatures that actually has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. You might notice that the qualifier of being non-magic is not present here, as it was incredibly commonly found in 2014. Now we can finally confirm that the language is completely gone from the new Monster Manual. Anyway, the Empyrean has some pretty interesting and unique mechanics going on with its Sacred Weapon attack. This hits at a plus 17, which is frankly just silly, but it also deals a solid 31 force damage on a hit. Now, when it does hit, the targeted creature gets to make a choice, whether it wants to be stunned until the start of the Empyrean's next turn, or if it wants to take an additional 21 force damage. Notably, it might need to make this decision twice if both attacks hit the same target, so the target may even end up being forced to choose between being stunned to avoid getting too low, or taking a little bit more damage to be able to do everything that they want to. Also of note, its Shockwave of Glory legendary action, which can deal damage and knock creatures prone on a hefty DC 23 strength save. Using this as its final legendary action right before the start of its next turn can allow it to make any of those Sacred Weapon attacks at advantage. That's gonna be rough. Moving on to CR24, there were exactly two choices here, both of which were dragons. Therefore, the deadliest CR24 dragon is the Ancient Gold Dragon, because I mean, the thing's got 546 hit points. The crazy thing though is yeah, it's got more hit points than the Silver Dragon, but there's no way this thing is actually more deadly. Now, make no mistake, its Weakening Breath is extremely powerful, but it's really mostly going to be martial melee characters who are going to feel the brunt of that disadvantage on strength-based D20 tests. Though it does seem like that 1d10 subtraction from damage rolls applies to everything. Its Fire Breath being tied to a DC 24 dex save is admittedly pretty damn thick though, so it should not be ignored. Probably the best part of the Gold Dragon's abilities though is its Banish legendary action, which it allows it to essentially remove one party member from the fight for a full round, but every round. And since it's tied to a DC 24 charisma save, it's probably gonna land. This will allow the dragon to have to focus on one fewer creature than it otherwise would need to, and can be incredibly effective at reducing the threats that it's facing. Runner-up for CR24 is the Ancient Red Dragon, and there isn't really a whole lot to say here, so I won't. Its Fire Breath and a 90-foot cone dealing an average of 91 fire damage is incredible, but probably one of the most effective things that it can do each round is use its Command legendary action to cast the Command spell at 2nd level, which allows it to target 2 creatures. Commanding someone to drop their weapons or flee or fall prone can be quite impactful depending on the circumstances of the fight. Moving on to CR25, there is only one creature to choose from again, so by default, that makes the deadliest creature here, the Colossus. It's got a massive AC of 23, 553 hit points, 60 feet of movement, resistance to radiant and necrotic damage, and immunity to poison and psychic. Its attacks and multi-attacks are all quite strong in their own right, and this thing does average around 100 damage per round without even breaking a sweat, especially since it's hitting at plus 18, so good luck dodging that. The really terrifying thing about the Colossus though is its Divine Beam attack. This is tied to an astronomical DC 26 dexterity saving throw that targets any creature in a ludicrously long 300-foot long and 10-foot wide line. If they fail, they take 10d12 radiant damage. But most concerningly, if the creature is dropped to 0 hit points with this, they're disintegrated into dust. Not just unconscious, not just killed, disintegrated. That's pretty damn brutal. And considering how much damage this thing can just put out in a round, and how much staying power it has, and how just stupidly high that DC is, it's not hard to imagine a world where this decimates a party. Now, disappointingly, there are actually no creatures at all between CR26 and CR29. So what that means is that we have made it all the way up to CR30, where we get to the big daddy of them all, the Tarrasque, which stands tall as our only CR30 and therefore deadliest CR30 creature. This Titan has an AC of 25, 697 hit points, plus 18 to initiative, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and immunity to fire and poison. It's got 6 legendary resistances and magic resistance as well. On top of that though, its Reflective Carapace trait makes it essentially immune to Magic Missile or any spell that requires an attack roll. If one is cast at the Trask, it rolls a d6. On a 1 to 5, nothing happens and the Trask isn't affected by the spell, but on a 6, the spell is reflected back at the caster. Then, looking at its attacks, it gets to make 1 bite attack and 3 other attacks between its claws or tail in any combination. All of these come in with a staggering plus 19 to hit and total out to an average damage well in excess of 100 per round. But perhaps most impressively to anyone familiar with the old version of the Trask will be its Thunderous Bellow feature, which is on a recharge 33% of the time. This thing targets creatures in a gargantuan 150-foot cone and subjects them to a DC 27 Constitution saving throw. I'm going to save you some time, just don't bother rolling. So when you fail, you take 12d12 thunder damage and are both deafened and frightened. So finally, the Trask has a ranged attack, and it is a ruthless one at that. On top of all of that though, its Swallow bonus action easily combines with its bite attack and is also tied to a DC 27 saving throw, this time being strength. Anyway, this too can functionally remove a party member from the fight and have it take an average of 56 acid damage per turn while swallowed. Oh, and then there's its world-shaking movement legendary action, which just forces any creatures in a 60-foot emanation to fall prone and immediately drop concentration on any spell they were concentrating on. No saving throw, nothing. They just fall prone and drop concentration. I'll say that probably the strangest design element of the new Trask is the fact that it isn't proficient in strength saves, but is proficient in intelligence saves. In fact, it's proficient in every save except strength or constitution, which are the two that you would logically expect it to be. I imagine that this was done simply so it wouldn't just auto-fail against plenty of spells and just completely trivialize the encounter. So you can decide whether you think that's good design or not. Anyway, that is it. That is the end of part 3. We have now completed our list of the deadliest creatures in the new 2024 Monster Manual. This was incredibly fun to do, but like I said before, took a crazy long time to make happen, so I'd love it if you could support the channel by subscribing, liking the video, and commenting and letting me know some of your favorite creatures, or what you think of these new monsters. That's all I got. Check out some of my other D&D videos, but otherwise, take care.